All right. Hi, folks. Steven here. I am on with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and we're going to be doing a discussion of the music of the Detective Pikachu movie. Of course, that came out last weekend and all that stuff. So, before we start doing our actual discussion, if you are in the chat, you can feel free to type comments or try and correct us on anything. We both did research. This is obviously a little different, and we're doing it really close. And our only way to see the movie is to watch it in the theater. So it's going to be a little different than our other discussions. Our next discussion, probably sometime next month, will be the Diancie movie. And let's see, after that, we don't have very many movies left. I think we just have the Hoopa movie after that, and that's it. And then we'll do some other topics that we'll talk about. Well, we're going to talk about the we sort of are following our regular pattern here because there is an English ending theme song and a Japanese-ish ending theme song. So be ready for both of those. We're still kind of following our usual format, which is kind of funny. We're also going to be talking about the score, some of the music used to promote the movie, and various other things. So I think this is a pretty interesting movie discussion-wise. I think we're going to get some good stuff out of this one. But with that being said, we're just going to kind of get started here. We're going to start our recording up here pretty quick and get going. But if you have any comments as the stream goes on, if you're watching this live, go ahead, type those in the chat. If you are watching this in a replay, go ahead, give us a comment. We'll try to work those into a future episode. After we're done with the discussion, we'll also talk about the movie itself, what we thought of that. And we'll also talk about, let's see, what's the other thing? Oh, we'll also talk about some of the upcoming stuff that won't be part of the discussion itself. Anywho, I'm going to start, let's see, my side of the recordings. Anne, are you ready to go over there?
I am ready.
All right, so just leave a little bit of silence, and then we'll go from there. Hi, folks, Steven here. I'm on the phone with Anne from Pikapi Podcast, and we're doing another little out-of-order discussion. This time we're talking about the music of the recently released Detective Pikachu movie. So this is one, I mean, we've been anticipating the movie itself, but also the music for quite a while, ever since we found out about it. Now, those of you that have been on our regular discussions, you know we usually take one of the animated movies, and we usually wind up comparing the English ending theme song to the Japanese ending theme song. Well, as I guess a bit of a treat, we get to do kind of the same thing here. On the English side, we have Rita Ora and Kaigu or Kaigo, or we're going to butcher some names on this episode, kind of unfortunately. But they do Carry On, which is, I guess you could say, the de facto English ending theme. And we don't go too far into it, but Anne, can you just briefly list who's on the Japanese quote-unquote side this time?
Okay, I'll go into it more later, but yes, Electricity, which is, I guess, the Japanese ending theme, although they're both on both movies as far as I can tell, has Pharrell Williams, Honest Boys, and Little Uzi Vert.
Yeah, so kind of an interesting setup. I kind of like it that they went with a dual ending theme song setup for this one. But yeah, we're going to talk about those songs. We're going to do the usual process. We're going to talk about the artists and things of that nature. And since I think most folks here would be more familiar with the English side, why don't you go into, we usually let you go first. Why don't you talk about the Japanese artists and stuff of that nature?
Well, to be honest, so many of my artists are American. Like Pharrell Williams, I could tell you a bit about him, but most of you have already heard most of his music. He's a rapper, singer, songwriter from America, born in Virginia, bit of a band nerd, and rose up through the music industry, and is currently enjoying fame and fortune over here. Honest Boys is the Japanese influence here. They are a 5-member hip hop group that is actually relatively new in that they've only recently come together, but all the 5 of the members have been in the music scene for a while. We have Naoto and Mandi from Exile, and Nigo, Sway from Doberman Infinity, and Verbal from M-Flow. So like these are some guys that have been around for a long time, and coming together as a kind of groovy hip hop group. And then Little Uzi Vert is also from America. He's an American rapper, singer, songwriter, born Seymour Woods. Let's see, he kind of began experimenting with rap in the 10th grade, and he has a very sort of different style. He raps very fast, and people kind of say he has a bit of a rock feel to his rapping. Like, some call his style emo rap. And since his inspirations are groups like Marilyn Manson and Paramore, My Chemical Romance, you can kind of see where those flavors start to fit in, and had a lot of breakthroughs with mixtapes, and has been able to collaborate with a lot of artists, working his way up the ladder, and is kind of one of the up and coming people to watch now. He's getting to open with the big names at events and music festivals now here in 2019. However, don't Google him at work, because in his personal life, he is known for promoting Satanism to the point where his record label took his Instagram away. So Google him in your own private time.
Gee, I thought we dealt with this a couple episodes ago when we
I
talked about the
know.
power of us. But I guess we can't escape these types of things. Any idea how this sort of production came together? It's kind of an interesting grab bag of folks there.
Indeed. Doing some research into it, Pharrell Williams has worked with Honest Boys as a unit before. He's also worked with some of the groups they came from, like Exile and such, in the past. And so has Little Uzi Vert. So he's worked with Pharrell. He's worked with a few overseas artists. Nigo from Honest Boys has collaborated with a lot of American rappers and hip hop artists. So I guess how it came together is the hip hop community must communicate very well with each other. You find somebody that you jam with, and you hang on to them. So all the news articles I read say it just seemed natural. Like, they thought of these people when they were thinking of people to work for. When they thought of someone to produce, Pharrell Williams came to mind. When he thought of who's he going to work with, this up and coming Japanese group came to mind, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, kind of neat. I think I read, does Pharrell Williams, does he have any kids? I think that might be another entry point for him getting into the franchise.
He does have a son, yes. Let's see oh, no, I don't have his birth date. So I don't know. He's probably not of the era to have watched the show, but he does have a child who may have grown up watching this.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty common thing with video game movies in general. On the Pokemon side, of course, Elliot Sloan from Blessed Union Souls didn't know much about Pokemon, but his son sure did. And similar story with Donna Summer. Actually, one of the reasons Raul Julia did M. Bison in the live-action Street Fighter movie is that his kids love the game, or so I've heard at least. So you do kind of find that stuff with some of this younger focused stuff. Their parents will get involved as actors or musicians through that kind of thing. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of that factored in here.
Right, yeah.
Any other background or production details you kind of wanted to put in there?
Not on the production side, no. I'm much more interested in talking about the song itself.
Yeah, I couldn't make out too much of it, but I think with that being said, let's talk about the production on the English side. Let me punch up my notes. Let's see here. Come on. Oh. There we go. Microsoft Word is not behaving. There we go. I'm not sure how much I'll really need these, but I did make a bunch of notes about the performers. So, Rita Ora is actually a very interesting person just in general. Even if you aren't interested in her music, she has an interesting life story. So she was born in 1990 in what was then Yugoslavia, and would now be the Kosovo portion of the former Yugoslavia. Some of you with world history backgrounds might know that in the early 90s and such that things in Eastern Europe were a little bit rocky for a little bit as the former communist bloc was breaking up. But when she was about 1, her family moved to the UK to sort of flee persecution in the kind of deteriorating situation there. So she doesn't really have any memories from there. But that if you're wondering why her last name doesn't sound terribly British, that's probably part of the reason there. But she sort of got into music as a kid and sort of worked up from there. Her first album was in 2012, more or less self-titled. And then there was kind of a big break in her career. She had some, I don't know, business type issues, record business type issues with her label or whatever. Um, and then she finally put out another album, I guess, last year called Phoenix. And she signed with, this name might make a little bit of sense, Atlantic Records. Let's see. And in between, she did some other stuff. She actually acted in the movie adaptations of the 50 Shades novels. So if you thought Ryan Reynolds was the only person on this project who had somewhat of an, I guess, an R-rated movie background, no. But in any case, she played, I guess, Mia Gray. I don't know if that's the title character or if that's just part of a family or something, because I really know very little about those movies or the book series. But this is, but you may also remember that she has a not a tiny part, not a huge part either. She plays one of the scientists in the lab there. Dr. Anne Laurent, I think is how that's pronounced there. Sort of carryover of one of the game characters. But that's who she is, and like I said, she's still obviously working and in the music industry, and I think we can expect some interesting things from her in the future. So Kaigu or Kygo, it's spelled Kygo is his stage name. So he's from Norway, another familiar country, I think, in the terms of the history of Pokemon music. But he was actually born in Singapore before at some point moving back. Let's see, I have his birth name is, oh, I'm going to butcher this, but Kyer Gorvel Dahl. Hopefully I got that kind of close to what it was. He's known in the house music genre, which I can never keep all the sub electronica genres straight personally, but house is kind of a more, it sort of came out after the disco era. It was sort of a way to do more electronic stuff in that somewhat similar style, but still divorced enough from it. He's known well in a couple of subgenres of house, that one of which we'll come up with later. One of his inspirations include, this is another tough name, Avicii, I think, Avicii.
Oh, yeah.
You may remember he died a year or two ago. Yeah, that's which is kind of sad. Sorry we have to mention that. But it looks like as far as Kaigu, his first album was in 2016 called Cloud9, which is actually kind of an interesting name. And then let's see, 2017 Kids in Love appears to be his latest album. As far as how this song comes together, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know if Rita was cast in the movie. I unfortunately haven't seen too many interviews with her about it. She was cast in the movie and then they decided to do the song, or if they decided to do the song and they said, hey, we got not a huge part, but a decent part for you in here. And she decided to take that up too. But in addition to her and Kaigu, there were 4 other folks involved in writing Carry On. Josh Kumbi, Natalie Dunn, let's see, Ilian Kidron, and Afshin Samani. I'm sorry, I'm really a lot of foreign names here. Good to have the diversity in music and all that, but hard on my tongue. In any case, I think they sort of refer to that as sort of a tropical house subgenre, which we'll talk about more later when we talk about the song. But there's also a music video. I also found a couple live performances, but I'm not sure exactly how much this was written for the movie or how exactly. Some of these seem to definitely be associates of Rita and Kygo. But I don't know too much else besides that about how this song ended up there. Probably speculate more about that later. Okay. I don't think, Anne, did you, I don't know if you, how much, if you did any research on this side. I was in charge of, I guess, most of the quote unquote English side here. Anything to add?
Oh, I did do some research, actually. I was really impressed. Both of them seem to be involved in a lot of charity works and philanthropy. And Rita Ora, especially, like, is an honorary ambassador to Kosovo and seems to do a lot of work trying to raise awareness for children's issues and refugee issues, women's issues, for people who are in struggling situations where the political climate of the country may not be as we would like. I found that very interesting and inspiring.
Yeah, I remember growing up hearing about the conflicts in the former Yugoslavia in the early to mid '90s, and because it used to be one big country, and now there's also some of the other former Yugoslav republics. You may hear them referred to as one. One of the other ones you would know is Bosnia Herzegovina. Was a big one in like I don't know, '93, '94. There was some conflict there, and things of that nature. So very interesting folks on this one, I have to say. Just from that perspective, I hope she gets to write a book someday. That might be kind of interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's about what we know about on the technical side. Let's talk about the songs themselves. And we're going to flip it back over to you. So you've mentioned some things like rap or hip hop or stuff like that. How would you kind of describe the style of Electricity?
Well, it's sort of a children's song meets hip hop in a way. Like, it's got this very positive, relaxed, bouncy vibe, but it's still very much like an R&B type song. I'm kind of finding it hard to classify because I think definitely it lives firmly in sort of an R&B hip hop world, but there's something about the instrumentation, and it almost seems to be all major chords that you like. It doesn't have that hard, violent edge that you sometimes hear in a lot of R&B or hip hop. It's got much more of a playful vibe to it. So I'm finding it very interesting. Like, you only have heard it in the theater, and then I've only heard it that way as well. What were your takes on it?
Well, like I said, there's some small parts of it that are in English, presumably from the American rapper there,
Hmm.
and I caught some of that. It has I don't know if bouncy is quite the right way to refer to it. There's definitely a bit of a vibe there. I've only really heard it a couple times because this one is unfortunately not commercially released. I have seen the movie twice. I watched it again yesterday with my mom, um, but I haven't had nearly the opportunity to listen to it as many times as Carry On, so I don't have it
Mm,
as firmly rooted in my head as I would probably like, especially since most of it is in Japanese. So that kind of makes
right.
things difficult. Not sure, and where'd you want to go from there?
Like, we can talk about the lyrics because I think there's definitely more to say there. We can read them. Um,
Sure. I'll give you
uh,
I'll give you a prompt and we'll go from there.
okay.
All right. Well, so maybe not a ton from me to say on sort of the feel there, just because it doesn't stick in my head all that well. It's certainly not like Together with the Wind or a Small Thing or stuff like that. The melody wasn't as memorable to me as some of those, certainly. But there's a few English lyrics, but there are also a lot of Japanese lyrics. What exactly is this song talking about, Anne? Do you know?
It kind of seems to be a lot of adventure Pokemon sort of things, like we're travelers, we're passing through the long nights, the rain will clear and the sun smiles, and we're going to explore the world and the galaxy. And then there's a whole bunch of sections where they're talking about, like, not being able to give up and talking about different kinds of people or Pokemon. Like, some of us only come out at night, some of us live down in the sea, but I'm different. And they find a good way to use the words electricity and, in Japanese, like pika pika, the onomatopoeic word to kind of convey sparks or twinkling. It's just a very fun song. It uses a lot of um, onomatopoetic phrases like bura bura, yura yura, um, and stuff like that, and just kind of in the way that hip hop does, kind of using the words as a rhythm, and kind of letting not just what you say but how you say it drive the feel of the song. And that, I guess that's what I meant by bouncy earlier, was they use words in a very creative way to kind of convey this electricity and all the normal things we expect from a Pokemon song, of traveling and of going on an adventure and meeting each other. But it also uses the fact that they're using both Japanese and English to make some interesting points of like they say we can't talk to each other in Japanese, and then in English it'll come out, but we know each other's hearts, so we know our words. And they'll say one phrase in English and then answer it in Japanese and the such, which is a theme that was talked about in the movie a bit. Whereas like the Pokemon, they don't speak human language, but they don't need to know what the words mean to understand what a human is feeling and saying.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. I was about to point that out myself. Thanks for bringing it
Oh.
up. But yeah, I mean, that is definitely one of the themes of the movie is that the Pokemon, I mean, I would assume that the Pokemon that live in the city have picked up on most of the common human phrases, as opposed to some of the wild Pokemon that we see on sort of the outskirts that are a little more, not as clued into this type of thing.
Yeah.
Sort of like a wild wolf versus a domesticated dog, that type of scenario.
Right.
But yeah, that's a neat thing. It makes me really kind of wish I understood more of it there, because it sounds like there was some really good thought that was put into the writing, at least of the lyrics there. I'm gonna have to. Hopefully, this becomes a little easier to listen to at some point, and then I can maybe take a closer listen. But I have very few Japanese skills, so I'm not sure how helpful it's going to be. But it was great shedding some light on there. I think there's some good stuff in there. I may have to try and look up a translation. Any other parts of the song that kind of map into what happens in the movie or certain things from the movie?
I'm trying to think. There's some words about memories and things. But there is a section where it talks about the words have descended upon me from the past and the future. And it's a twerp dimensional. Like they actually use the word Team Rocket uses for twerp in Japanese, jari. I think it's supposed to be a pun. I'm not sure exactly how that's supposed to translate. But yeah, the call out to Team Rocket there was fun, but also like there's just that concept of the fathers and the sons that Mewtwo was bringing up, and the past and the future that both the villains were trying to kind of bring about, and Mewtwo as well. I don't know, like, yeah, there were a lot of deeper themes that I need like 5 more watches on this movie to really put into words. But yeah, talking about how like the words have the power to change our reality and like bring the past and the future together, or like just reminds me a lot of like that son and that father coming together in a way they didn't expect. While, our villains were a son and a father who kind of came apart in a way that we didn't expect.
Yeah. I guess I should have mentioned definite spoilers in this discussion.
Sorry,
so if for
yes.
some crazy reason you haven't seen this movie yet,
And you're watching this.
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what would have led to that, but I'm sure it's possible. All right, yeah. Now there isn't any other side material for this. Like I said, it hasn't even really been commercially released. It sounds like we were just talking before this. We recorded this. That this is sort of the group's the Proud Boys, like their first big single and stuff like that, and they want to try and maybe they couldn't get it all worked out in time for the movie's release. Does that sound like that might have happened there?
It's hard to say what the exact reasoning is, but Honest Boys, they've released 1 or 2 singles domestically in Japan, but this would be their first worldwide international release, signing with an international label and releasing something properly worldwide. And just knowing how Japan kind of does their promotional, like they make a big deal out of the debut, and an international debut is a thing. I imagine that they probably have a bit more hype that they're going to be doing around their own country before, and maybe some promo overseas as well before this hits sales. But it is coming.
Okay, well, I think we should head back over to the English side. Carry On. I had mentioned Tropical House. So I I was looking up the genre definition because, like I said, I cannot keep all the electronica subgenres straight because there are dozens of them.
All magic.
In any case, what it usually does is it means it is house music, but it has rather than sort of a harsher, heavier vibe to it. It's still very, percussion and whatnot in there, but it has more of an uplifting feel to it than regular, quote unquote, I guess you could say, garden variety house music does, based on what I read there. And I think that, I mean, obviously, a song like "Carry On" is. Well, I suppose you could go in more than one way just from the title, but given the movie and stuff like that, you kind of want it to have more of a positive vibe. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure how much. I mean, I listen to a pretty wide diversity of music, but I'm not usually too up on the popular music trends of the day. I tend to listen to popular music mostly on like planes and stuff of that nature to get like parody ideas. So I'm not sure I'm the best person to sort of describe this, but yeah, uplifting, going back to that, is probably a pretty good way to describe it. Is that sort of the vibe you got from the overall tone of the song, Anne?
Definitely. And maybe I'd add like that it has a little bit of a dreamy quality to it in places.
Yeah, certainly the background vocals that Rita does definitely give it sort of a dreamy quality. Although I have to mention that Kaigu's first album was called Cloud Nine, which I'm not mistaken is got a little plush here. Excuse me. Got a little plush here of Psyduck, which I think is also one of Psyduck's abilities. Total coincidence, I'm sure, but I
Or
felt like
is
mentioning
it?
it. Anywho, that's sort of what I had to say there. It's certainly not like a sort of heavy. It's not the most energetic instrumentation either. We're going to do some comparisons to, I guess you could say, the last sort of one of the earlier, I guess is maybe a better way to put it, pop acts to do a Pokemon song that was heavily promoted to radio and stuff like that. And I think we're going to have some interesting contrasts to draw there, but you kind of see that it is fairly light and of that nature. Does what I just said there make any sense, Anne?
Absolutely. No, I think you covered it well.
All right. Well, let's talk about the lyrics. Obviously, there are some things I don't necessarily. I said I would when I first heard this song. I would reserve judgment until or final judgment on this song. I mean, I guess you got to give that time. But until after I had seen the movie, and having seen the movie now, I mean, there are some definite parallels you can talk about with either the relationship with Tim and his father / Detective Pikachu. Sorry to spoil that ending there. And things of that nature, to carry on for someone else to sort of try and solve, his dad's last case that he was working on when he allegedly died and stuff of that nature. That was kind of a one thread that sort of carried through there. What did you notice, Anne?
The chorus is like, you found me and you made me into something new. Like, lead me through the deepest waters. I promise I'll carry. Like, that is what Pokemon is all about, is we find each other, and through Pokemon training, we're made into something better. And because our trainer pulls us through the hard times, and because our Pokemon takes us through these hard challenges, we carry on, we become stronger together. Like I might cry. Like, that's deep. That's exactly what this franchise in this movie is supposed to be.
Yeah, there's definitely some very good Pokemon type things there. Yeah, the tie-in with the becoming a better version of yourself.
Yeah.
Although there is obviously, as you know, if you've seen the movie, an imperfect messenger for that, who I think first states that. But
Tim and Pikachu, who, spoiler alert, is actually his father, like, they kind of have that same situation. Because Tim finds Pikachu, he's become something new because he was able to interact with Pikachu. The dad has a connection to his son that he didn't have before, that he always wanted. Because they went through this dangerous situation together, they learned to care about each other in a way they didn't have before and became different people. And I don't know, there's something very sweet about that.
Yeah, there is. It's not as, I think, it's definitely not as gut-wrenchingly tied to the lyrics as
Mm.
We're a Miracle, which, as we've pointed out many times, wasn't actually written for Pokemon, the first movie. So it is maybe a little bit, I think I maybe, this is to spoil my kind of opinion, is I expected something that would tie in a little more closely to certain plot events in the movie or stuff like that, in sort of a non-explicit Pokemon way.
Mm.
That, like, if you've seen the movie, you would get that rather than sort of more of the thematic elements. I think I kind of expected something a little bit different there.
Mm.
And I guess the deepest water is maybe not the best analogy, because I mean they go to like the docks and stuff like that, but they're never going to like the ocean or whatever Rhyme City's nearest major body of water is. There's a stream or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, it's not
So
literal, but definitely metaphorical. They go through some rough stuff. So,
absolutely. And, you know, I mean, obviously, it's also kind of doubly works as kind of a love song, which is, I guess, sort of its nod or in to like radio play and stuff of that nature. So certainly a little bit there. Any other lyrics or other elements that sort of caught your attention there, Anne?
no, that was the big one, was the chorus.
All right. Well, I did say we were going to compare this to a previous Pokemon song, and let's see, I get another prop that I get to bring up. So, for the first time in a very long time, unless you count, well, there was that Can't Stop Catching Them All. This is kind of the first song in a long time that has like an official, highly produced music video for it. Of course, the last one was, let's see, does that come up on screen?
I can see the hole.
Oh, wait. There you go. That's, yeah, Don't Say You Love Me by M2M from the first movie. Also not maybe directly tied in, although that has a different story behind it. And that one was like slightly edited, but not really written for the movie, that whereas Carry On was. But as you probably know, Carry On does have a full music video, which has Rita. I don't think Kagu is shown anywhere in the video in particular, like in the background or anything, but I don't recognize him that well. He's as opposed to Rita, who's wearing that yellow raincoat / jacket or whatever it is. And she's sort of going through sets from the movie and sort of going around town driving. And then we have little clips from there. To be honest, I mean, with a movie music video, especially if it's going to be released a few weeks before, you don't want to spoil too much. Which, you know, for this discussion, I did go back and rewatch Don't Say You Love Me, the Pokemon version of that music video, because recall there are two versions. And that doesn't spoil a ton either, but I don't know. I feel like I should have something here to say that sort of summarizes things, but I think we're going to have to work our way towards that. And you saw this music video. What were your kind of thoughts?
Well, I liked it and I didn't like it. I've never been a fan of music videos that intercut between the singer and scenes from the movie very much, especially if it's an animated and a live action. Obviously Detective Pikachu is a bit straddling that line. Like it just seems to jar me, and I always feel I'd rather just see an entire montage of the movie or just the singer's music video. But that said, like, I do think if they were going to do that, the choices of scenes they used and like the sets that Rita walked through were choice. Like, it looked really good. It had a nice vibe of kind of searching for something. Like it had a bit of an emotional journey even. So, like, I mean, I liked it. I would have rather just have Rita in that whole music video though.
I suppose. To be honest, I don't know that I got quite as much as you did out of that music video. I mean, it
That's fine.
isn't bad or anything. It isn't, garish or anything. It uses some things fairly well. I mean, the most notable thing is there's a lot of lightning bolts, I guess, in this music video that are added as post-production effects. and one of them sort of illuminates Rita, and you can see her shadow looks like Detective Pikachu,
Hmm.
which is a fun little touch. I'd equate that to kind of in the Pokemon version of "Don't Say You Love Me's" music video, where as they're about to start the second verse, they have that shot of Raichu and Pikachu from the vacation short running along that trench or whatever it is with their cheeks against each other, and that I think might have been a little more tight editing. I'm not sure. Like I said, and I think you got more of it's not a bad music video, and it obviously has a very different tone to it than "Don't Say You Love Me," which is at a drive-in movie theater, as opposed to "Carry On," which uses like I said, is going through some of the movie sets and ostensibly rhymes city she's driving around and stuff of that nature.
Mm.
Um, but I don't know, Anne. Any thoughts in that area?
I tried to appreciate it, but as I said, I tend not to care for those types of music videos that intercut with footage from a movie. I want it to be one or the other. So,
Well, there is one idea I kind of wanted to float out there, and if you're listening in the chat room, I'd love to get a reaction on this one. Otherwise, if you're watching this in after it's been posted, give us a comment. But I kind of wanted to ask Anne. Remember back in the day, back in what season 2 of the Pokemon anime, and they did some variations on this. They did, but in season 2, they did a thing called Pikachu's Jukebox,
right.
where they would take songs back then from To Be a Master,
Hmm.
and they would put those on there, and they would have the lyrics scrolling by at the bottom. I kind of wish they had gone the extra step here and done that kind of like Detective Pikachu edition of Pikachu's Jukebox. I think would have been fun because it did like a couple "Who's That Pokemon" things on social media and in promotional stuff. And I think that would have been a fun way to sort of go back there, is to have like the CGI Pikachu, like you saw at the beginning of those, and then have like the lyrics going in there. I think that would have been a nice nod to the original Gen 1 audience. What do you think about that?
That could have been really fun. Yeah. What an idea. Especially since that was a lot of those aired on WB, who own, like, they distributed this movie. Am I not right?
Yeah, we're gonna get into that because this thing changed hands partway through, and I think that may have affected the music, although it's hard to say for sure. But I did want to put out the Pikachu's Jukebox idea because I think that would have been a very nice touch that would have made things maybe a bit more interesting. Um, but yeah, I don't know that I got a ton. I think I got maybe a little more. Don't Say You Love Me, because it has an alternate non-Pokemon version, is a little bit different because it needs to stand on its own without that footage.
Mm.
Um, so it's structurally a little bit different, and it has its own sort of little quote unquote plot. Like I said, music videos
Right.
don't have to be works of like Scorsese level type stuff or anything like that. But I won't begrudge it for existing. I think they could have done more with it, but that's kind of just me. And let us know if you have any thoughts on that one. Okay, well, I think we should move on to sort of our compare and contrast part. This is the usual part in our normal anime discussions where we talk about, do we want which version do we prefer, and sort of decide which side each does better. Um, I will say I am very interested. I kind of wish I could get like a subtitled version of the Japanese ending theme song, because it sounds like they did some really interesting stuff some of it I'll probably never be able to appreciate unless I really study down and improve my Japanese skills. But sounds like it does some really interesting things from a lyrical perspective, but maybe not so much compositionally. Whereas I think Carry On maybe a little more interesting melodically. Um, Although like I said, I wouldn't call this maybe it's good. It's not bad or anything. It's just that I'm not sure exactly where I wanted to go with that, but in any case, it seems a little more interesting to me melodically. Like even if I couldn't hear the words to either of them, I would say that one is a bit more interesting. Is that kind of the dynamic you read there, Anne?
I'm very torn, and I'm going to give my answer with the caveat that it may change in the future, just because I don't feel we have the opportunity to listen to Electricity in high depth as much, so I can't appreciate its musicality as much. Um, I've heard Pharrell Williams remix a lot of Vocaloid music. Well, not a lot of Vocaloid music, but a lot of like different genres of music, including Vocaloid. And I'm always impressed that he does something that I would never have expected. And sometimes it works to my taste and sometimes it doesn't, but he has a willingness to try something different. And there's something about electricity that's very not what I expected. And as I said when I was talking about the lyrics, it does a lot of things linguistically in the Japanese language that are very cool, as well as using the fact that it's working off of two different languages to convey a theme. That said, Carry On, that chorus, man, like it almost made me cry. And the idea of like what Pokemon training is supposed to be and that it pushes you to carry on through hard times. I kind of think I'm going to give it to Carry On, again with the caveat that this may change once electricity releases proper and I am able to get a bit of a better sense of it.
Yeah, we are definitely at a bit of a disadvantage here. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think that that Electricity is probably the more ambitious song, and whether it succeeds is difficult for me to say. It seems like it does some things well. Neither one of these is, none of them are bad. I will be very clear about that. This is not a series where we go in and say everything's either pass, it's the greatest thing ever, or it's the worst thing, it's worse than the plague or something like that. That's not what we do in this series. There is something in between where it's just, I like these reasonably well. They're fun to listen to, but they're also not, neither of these I don't think is going to be my favorite on either side. Like if we're ranking them in together with all of the like animated movie ending themes, I can definitely, they're maybe a bit above average, I would say, in that if we're going to rank them in that table or pantheon or whatever there.
I can see Electricity doing very well in Japan and Carry On doing very well in the US. I don't know about other countries to be sure, but like the type of hip hop that's used in Electricity seems that to me, like it would fit in very well with the style of rap and hip hop that I usually hear coming out of Japan. So I have a feeling it could do very well there. Whereas Carry On definitely speaks to my more Western sensibilities. So it could be there was some deliberate choice to go wildly different directions.
That's possible as well. I'm sure someone from at least the movie studio was listening to both of these and maybe guided them in some ways, both towards the source material, but also musically further apart. And that means we get two different songs. That's quite possible. It's hard to say because we don't have, like I said, the biographical information or the production details. I haven't really been able to find too much.
Which is,
but I think these both do. I'm not sure that I can really come with a favorite. Like I said, for ambition, I would give Electricity probably more stuff there. For compositional stuff, I would definitely give Carry On the nod there. I don't know, because they do different things reasonably well. It's hard for me to say one is necessarily all that much better than the other. I'm going to call this kind of a tie in different areas. If you kind of get what an aggregate tie or whatever you want to call it. They both have strengths that are different from each other, but they don't have, neither one of them is so strong in one of them that I have to put it on top there. Okay, well, there are a bunch of other musical aspects we should talk about. The first one we should definitely talk about is actually the score. So they got a guy by the name of, Henry Jackman, who has been, he's been working on scores for actually a long time. I actually did some research on him. It looks like, turns out he actually worked on, all right, another little prop here. Yeah, so I'm not sure how many of you remember this video game from back in the early 90s. This is called MC Kids, and as the thing implies there, this is a McDonald's-themed game. But he worked on the music, apparently, for the Commodore 64 version. You were seeing the cartridge for the NES version. In other territories, the game is known as McDonald Land. But I found that very interesting. I'm not sure if the music was created from scratch or if it's rearrangements from the NES version there. But back in the early 90s, he did a few video game soundtracks there. And he's done some more recent ones in sort of the modern era as well. But let's see, he's from the UK originally. And some of the more recent ones you might know, he's done a few of the MCU movie scores. He's done, as far as video game related stuff, he's done both of the Wreck-It Ralph movie scores, so the original one and also Ralph Breaks the Internet that came out last year, as well as the financially somewhat successful but critically panned Pixels. So he does have some experience in that area. But he did the score along with, I think, he had a few helpers fill in some of the parts there. And the score album, as well as Carry On, they're separate, but you can buy those both digitally. If you want a physical version, you're going to have to dig a little harder. I think some foreign territories have them on, has the score on CD, but not here in America, as far as I can tell, kind of unfortunately. But I'm unfortunately not too familiar with most of his other movies. I think I've seen one or two of them. Like I think he worked on Turbo, the snail movie, which I think also starred Ryan Reynolds, if I remember correctly, in the voice acting role. But I don't remember too much. As far as what he did for this movie, it's an interesting sort of. It's mostly kind of orchestral, a lot of brass type stuff in various places, I would say. But kind of the other interesting thing, there's definitely one distinct theme that was created for this movie, and I did, by the way, also listen to at least some of the Detective Pikachu game soundtrack, which I haven't played the game, but doesn't seem to be much similarity there, other than some of the tonal stuff, but no like carried over melodies. But he had some electronic sounds in there in various places. Sorry, that was a whole big mess, and I jumped all over the place. Let me do that one more time.
It's okay.
Anywho. But as far as sort of his approach to this particular score, there's a couple interesting elements to it. As far as major themes, the one main theme I would say is sort of the quote unquote Rhyme City theme. It's the theme we first hear when we go there. It's hard for me to quote, but it actually kind of reminds me, the way it sort of jumps in pitch reminds me a little bit of what I've termed in the Pokemon games the Masuda or Junichi Masuda roaming note that you hear in some of the Pokemon songs and some of his other work as well, where the note kind of jumps up and down. And I think Rhyme City's theme and some of the other electronic stuff in there does kind of get that vibe. But like I said, I think those are original. Compositions and not new stuff. But Anne, any thoughts on your end on the score?
I love the Rhyme City theme. Like, oh my gosh, I heard that and it was just like magic. Yeah, like the Rhyme City is my favorite track on the entire score, but I also really enjoyed the variety, I guess, in the entire soundtrack. Like the opening, when they're catching the Cubone, almost sounds like the opening of like a cross between a Disney movie and Lord of the Rings or something. Like it's kind of got that grandiose, but also that positive, the sun is shining on our new adventure. And then it kind of moved into some stuff that was more dark and dreary. And then you got that house music for when they're in the fighting ring. Like I just appreciate that there was a lot of variety in the types of music in this soundtrack.
Yeah, I mean, if we're comparing it like musically to say, I've had my I guess you could call them gripes about some of the anime stuff produced by Shinji Miyazaki in the last 6 or 7 or 8 movies. I think I enjoyed the score to this movie as music a bit more, maybe just because it was somewhat different. If we're making that type of comparison, but it did feel a little more lively. It's also different from, say, the stuff that was done by, Ralph Shukka on the first couple Pokemon movies, or, it might be closer to what Ed Goldfarb did on the movies where he rescored those a little bit there. And, maybe that's just an East versus West type of thing to a certain extent, but I did kind of want to, mention that just a little bit. I did, like I said, like the electronic touches. I don't feel like they were too overdone or anything of that nature.
Well, in a movie starring a Pikachu, isn't it fitting to have some electronica going on?
Well, given the source material as well, I would expect some of that in there. I think that was, without overstaying its welcome too much. Like I said, this isn't going to go up there in terms of scores with some of the movies. Like I think my 4 favorite movie scores in the Pokemon series of movies are 1, 2, 5, and 10, which is Mewtwo, Lugia, Latios, and Latias, and then the Darkrai movie. In case you don't remember where those numbers go, score wise, those are some of my favorites. I don't know if this is quite up in there, but I did like it as a change. Now, we should mention there are two, well, probably several, but there are two pieces of score elements that are not on the soundtrack, but are definitely in the movie, and it's kind of unfortunate for both. One of those is an instrumental version of the dub English Pokemon theme that it plays when the Cliffords, father and son, are doing their promo there. You can hear that in the background when they're doing the promo for the parade that comes later in the movie. And also at the beginning of the end credits, where they're showing the sort of like game versions of the various characters who are played by various actors in the movie, there's a rearrangement of the Pokemon original game theme. And neither of those are on there. I can only assume it's licensing issues of some sort. They didn't want to bother for the score album there to put those on, but they absolutely deserve it if you ask me to be in there. Be nice, but I guess that just wasn't something they had the time to work out there. That's kind of too bad. Any thoughts, Anne, on those?
Not much. Like, it's a shame to not have it on the soundtrack proper, but again, I can see why they maybe wouldn't. And again, I'm so taken with Rhyme City and some of the other tracks that I don't miss them too much because I can get those themes anywhere else.
I suppose so. And I guess there's a couple other musical aspects. I think we're more or less done with the score there. I think there's a couple other musical aspects we should talk about. One of the people in the chat wanted to know if we were going to talk about Ryan Reynolds' really depressing rendition of the English dub Pokemon theme. And we're not sure if they replace these instances of it with the aim to be a Pokemon master in the Japanese version, or who knows what they would have done in the Italian version of this movie.
Oh my gosh, I know. Some people from other countries, please write in. I need to know this.
Yeah. So it would be interesting to know those. But like I said, Ryan gives this very depressing, dejected version of it. And I'm not sure what else to say about it, other than I'm not sure. I would say stick to acting. I know it was meant to be a comedic performance and all that stuff. I'm just saying.
I hope it's my new ringtone. I want to figure out how to make that my new ringtone.
I suppose. I like I said, I liked it. I didn't. I think the common theme we've come through on this discussion, Anne, is I think you got more out of this movie musically than I did. Do you think?
I was pretty darn determined to like this movie, so.
Well, I like the movie. We'll talk more about the movie itself later. But as far as the music, I mean, it serves its purpose well. But it wasn't, for the most part, there weren't too many parts where I said this was extraordinary and something that, like, if I'm looking at this from a radio personality or radio programmer perspective, since I still do some stuff in that area, not sure how much of this would be stuff I absolutely have to put this on, at least in regards to the score and stuff of that nature.
Gotcha.
But there's, even though it's not technically, well, part of it is music. We should talk about the fact that for the Pokemon voices, they did not, for the most part, use voices from the TV show. Psyduck voice is definitely not Michael Hagney. And some of the other ones, they did use, Aiku Tani's Pikachu for the parts where Detective Pikachu is speaking, but doesn't really have any, but is not being inhabited by the soul of Tim's father.
Right. It made me so happy to see Ikue's name in the credits, and now our international 6 Degrees of Separation game has just jumped up.
Oh yeah, we got some good ones on this one. Let me tell you.
Yes.
But there is one other quote unquote musical sample in there that the person who made it was not aware until people told her about it. So one of the Pokemon featured in here is, of course, a singing Jigglypuff. And rather than re-record something, it looks like they just picked up a stock sound of Rachel Lillis doing Jigglypuff's voice. I guess they must have done something similar for the Japanese version with Purin. which Rachel did not know about, and I guess didn't get paid for either. So I'm not sure what.
As you mentioned, if they classified it less as a voice acting role, as more as like a stock music clip, it could be that she received royalties. In which case, that won't come until later.
In the next quarter or whatever.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure how that, because it was credited, I think, in the end credits as music, as were, I guess, probably the spa music in the car scene. Is probably in there, and one or two other things that we haven't mentioned. I'd have to look at the credits again and take a look at the music credits to get all of those. But she was not aware of that until after the movie debuted, and apparently some folks told her. So I guess that makes it, I guess their other option was to be getting another voice actor for Jigglypuff and do that. Because I think the Jigglypuff song is based on something from the game. When you go to one of the Pokemon centers in the original game, it's not something that was totally made up just for the anime. It was embellished there, but I thought that was worth mentioning as something that did happen with all of this. But yeah, if we're talking about the sound and music of the movie, I think musically, and it sounds like you got more out of this than I did. I didn't think any of it was bad musically. I just it's not going to musically compare to some of the other movies, and my feeling for those, either because of nostalgia or because they had a different approach there. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. Like I said, I was pretty determined to be pleased and to enjoy every aspect of this movie, but also, as you say, I'm a little burned out on Shinji Miyazaki and some of his work recently. It's like, it was just nice to hear something fresh and dynamic and different, and to appreciate that for a season.
So yeah, I think that's going to about do it for our discussion of the music. Now, our next episode, we're going to be resuming back with the last couple of animated movies that we have to work with for now. You may remember that a ways back we did the Genesect movie. So, of course, our next one is going to be Diancie and the Cocoon of Destruction is going to be our next anime movie music discussion. Let's see. On the English side, let's see. Let me look this one up quick. I remember give this a second here to, this is always fun. There we go. What is it? Okay. On the English side, we have Danny Marcus with Open My Eyes. As you may recall, the X and Y generation is when the music sort of switched hands from the John Leffler, David Wolfert crew to the Ed Goldfarb crew. So this is going to be the first one that. And so we have sort of a different group of people working on it. And then on the Japanese side, I don't remember the artist, but we talked about this earlier, Daybreak Meteor Shower. Anne, can you just fill us in on the basics on that one?
Yeah, Daybreak Meteor Shower by Scandal.
Yeah. I have to say, one of the regrets I had is that the Scandal did come to a convention I was considering visiting, but because of the language barrier, I think they're going to be at Anime Central near Chicago one year, but I didn't avail myself. If you fault me for something in my coverage, there was one point where I didn't think it was particularly maybe worth trying, but in any case, that's going to be our next discussion. So that'll be coming up probably sometime next month. And until then, Anne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, looks like we might be having some problems here.
I'm plugged into the Ethernet. I hope it's not me.
I'll do a quick outro, and then after this, we'll do our quick little movie discussion. We'll see how quick it is. But all right. In any case, all right, folks. Thanks. And then, like I said, next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a discussion of the movie for about 5 or 6 or 10 minutes, and we'll kind of go from there. And then before we sign off, we're going to do a sort of discussion of what's happened recently on the channel and also what's coming up. But next is going to be our movie discussion. Okay, so this being the first live-action Pokemon movie, sort of live-action anyway, it was definitely an interesting project. I looked into some of like the background stuff on this and how like the Pokemon Company only wanted to license this side game, not the main series, for a live-action movie. And we sort of had that transfer over, which we should also talk about as sort of a bonus. Which we should also talk about a little bit. But as far as the movie itself, I really, really did enjoy it. It's one of the better Pokemon movies. If we're sort of slotting it in with my list of all-time favorites, it's another one of those. I like to say, with the number of movies we have currently, there's a top third. They're the ones I kind of pretty much recommend. It does not top, as you might have guessed from my opinions on some of the music and other related stuff, it does not top The Power of One as my favorite Pokemon movie of all time. I'm not sure I'll ever get something better than that. But I felt the writing was pretty good. The acting, the characters played off each other very well. Not sure how much else I have to say. It was fairly good, and this is, we know this is the first critically, maybe not acclaimed, but certainly the first as far as a certain type, certain movie rating aggregator website is labeling it as the first fresh video game movie. And what were kind of your overall thoughts?
Well, I'm just constantly reminded of back in the day when we were like, how could you ever make a live Pokemon movie? And what would that look like? And who would you cast? And how could you make it have that magic that that you can have in animation? And I'm just so grateful for the ambition behind this project. They did it. And I'm grateful that I walked in and from the first scene, they were talking about the philosophy of Pokemon training in a way that showed that they were taking the source material seriously. It wasn't going to be a parody of itself or poking fun at the fans. They just straight up honest did a Pokemon movie, and it was beautiful. I'm just so grateful that we got to have that.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some of the, obviously very limited budget, but some of the fan attempts at doing some sort of live action Pokemon thing. It always coming, relatively cheap because these are just regular old people and they don't have that much to work with. So I think some of us probably had doubts about whether this could be done. And I'll have to take a look really at the Blu-ray version to get a full idea of the picture. But things hold up reasonably well. I'm sure that they've greenlit a sequel for this and stuff. They'll work on tweaking the visuals to get them to be a little bit tighter and work on some things they didn't have time to get quite as far as they would have liked.
But I don't know.
But yeah, like I said. Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I'm thinking about other animated franchises that we've seen be made into live action movies. And usually there is kind of a tendency to skew them very adult and make a lot of inappropriate jokes or to kind of make fun of the franchise they're making into live action. And I'm just going into this movie, I was very afraid that was going to happen with Pokemon, where it would be ridiculing and parodying as much as it would be celebrating, or that it would be something that you wouldn't necessarily want to take your kids to. And it hit this beautiful balance where it's not inappropriate for children, but that movie was made for older fans. Definitely skews higher than, 8 years old.
Yeah, I think they did a good job squaring between sort of the newer audience, which I think sometimes the online fan base sometimes forgets about if they don't have kids who are old enough. It's a lot of them don't yet. And also the sort of the original fan base, and also folks who maybe don't have a ton of things, like, Gen Xers who were a little too old when it came out, or, people who are parents of sort of the original generation and maybe know a little bit from Go and from their kids, but maybe not a ton.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a reasonably accessible movie. That's always been one of the questions I want to ask, is what's the most accessible Pokemon movie? And I think this does a reasonably good job. Although at this point, if you don't know a ton about Pokemon, that came off totally wrong. At this point, if you've had some pretty good opportunities to have a decent, if you can spend half an hour to an hour playing a mobile game that was pretty hard to ignore a couple years ago. I can understand some people getting passed by if they never had kids or whatever, stuff like that. So I'm not going to fault you too hard for it, but I don't know. I do kind of wonder if the better critical response is partially a function of more movie critics also being more familiar with video games, Because people calling this, oh, it's the first good video game movie, and it's not just Pokemon fans who would argue with folks on that point.
It's definitely something to be thought of, I guess, in the sense that movie critics, movie makers are all growing up and we're seeing the value and the art potential in those video games and things we grew up with. Whereas when we were growing up and the adults were looking down at us, they didn't always see that same vision. So like, I think, as you say, we're kind of getting into a place where the movie critics are looking at these projects with a different eye. The people making movies are looking at these franchises with a different eye. And so they're making better movies and the reviewers are giving them a chance, and the audiences are appreciating them in a different way, I think. I think there's something to that thought that could be built off of, yeah.
Well, looking through some of the feedback on this, I'm reminded of something that Steven D'Souza, the writer/director of the live-action Street Fighter movie that I mentioned earlier, said is that I don't remember the exact word to use, but I think he kind of said that he got a lot of pushback for making a movie based on a video game, and he had an inkling that someday the source material will not have so many let's see, weight on it is not the word I'm looking for. Baggage associated with it, maybe is the word. I forget the exact words he used there, but it's on like the commentary for that movie if you ever look it up. And maybe we finally started to reach that point, because movies themselves were not viewed in the best light for a long time either.
And just think of our generation, like when we were kids, before Lord of the Rings came out, you couldn't like a fantasy movie or a fantasy book without being the weirdo. And now it's an established, celebrated, privileged genre even. And, the superhero movies, what they've done with that and the journey that Marvel just took us on. Like, yeah, I think there's probably an entire paper that could be written, an entire thesis dissertation on the way we're perceiving and the emotional baggage and critiques and how that ties into how we review a movie.
Yeah. So if anyone listening to this happens to be a movie critic and maybe you reviewed some of those earlier video game/Pokemon movies, I'm not going to say that the first couple of Pokemon movies are masterpieces and everyone should like them. But I would say maybe look back at there and see if maybe there weren't some things that you appreciate more now. And I think they're better than some of their Rotten Tomatoes or Metacritic ratings. I think we have a tendency for those things to be very pass fail, and I think they're not nearly. They may, like I said, they may not be masterpieces, but I think they're better than their aggregate scores would suggest. All right, one more thing we need to actually do here. There's a particular aspect we forgot to talk about here. I didn't get too much direct feedback on this one, so I don't have too much to put in there. We'll save some of that for the end. But we forgot to talk about the marketing for this movie and the music used there. So that'll be another bonus segment, or we might splice it in. But we're going to do that now. I made a list. So before we do the actual thing there, just remember there's Happy Together by the Turtles. There's what else? Oh, there's Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler. And then the last one they did for some of the stuff was there was a major like pre-existing song was, oh gosh, it's by Whitney Houston. What is it called again? I Want to Dance with Somebody, which is kind of interesting. So, because I want to talk about that, because I think, remember, this thing changed hands. All right, well, there's one other musical aspect I kind of wanted to talk about, and it's the fact that you may remember this movie, I believe, was originally going to be distributed by Universal. And because of, in part, some things involving Legendary Pictures changing hands or whatnot, last summer, this, along with some other Toho related stuff, like there's a Godzilla movie that's coming out eventually, sort of changed hands and went over to Warner Brothers. So it's kind of a little difficult to say, like, how much Warner Brothers and their associated record labels had to do with the music that's actually in the movie, since I think some of that might have been determined before the movie, or might have been determined during production and before the changeover. So some of this is going to be speculation. We don't really have the whole story here. But I kind of wanted to compare the treatment of music in the movie to some of the promotional stuff that had been done there. You may remember the first trailer that came out in November used the Turtles Happy Together. I don't have a copy of that one, but I figured I might as well drag out right now. Yeah, I'm not sure how well you can see that, the folks at home, but my preferred version is the Nylons cover of that song.
Bring it back a little bit, and we'll.
Well, let's see here.
That's better.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah, you're right. That does work a lot better. This is the Nylons are an a cappella group, very popular here in Madison. They formally hung things up a few years ago, but that's where I kind of learned about Happy Together. But anyway, but talking about that, sorry. And then sort of the other stuff being used there is Holding Out for a Hero by Bonnie Tyler. And then there was an audition video they put out that used I Want to Dance with Somebody Who Loves Me by Whitney Houston. So kind of an interesting sort of range there. That last one, I'm particularly familiar with the original version to an extent, at least. I certainly remember hearing it. Kind of different choices from the main movie, which I think is more reserved. And I kind of wanted to point that out because I'm not sure this is all... We don't really know exactly how much, like, if this had been a Warner Brothers run project, would we have gotten something closer to like the first couple movies where we got those full soundtrack with lots of pop songs in there and a few more maybe inserted into the movie than we actually got. Especially knowing, myself, that one of the writers who worked on this also worked on the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, or at least one of them anyway. And, we obviously know that those movies have a lot of great little insert songs. And this movie, like we said, doesn't really have anything like that. Anne, any thoughts there?
That's something to think about. Yeah. And we'll never know what ifs. But for my part, I think not having established songs as an insert is a benefit to it. But for the trailer, I think it worked really well because they talked a bit about this on the Moulin Rouge commentary of all things. But there are certain songs that even if you don't particularly like them, the entire world agrees that they're good songs. Even if you don't particularly enjoy listening to Elton John, an Elton John song is a pretty good song. So when you play something like So Happy Together, it sparks something in your mind because it's a pre-existing song and it has so much attached to it. And the same thing with I Want to Dance with Somebody and Holding Out for a Hero. We hear that song and immediately we feel things and we think things. And the goal of the trailer is to kind of, in a very short time, get you to feel all the things so that you want to go see this movie. But I'm very glad that those songs did not end up in the movie proper because that was a different experience.
Yeah, that's an interesting call there. I did kind of want to mention, though, Happy Together does have another Pokemon connection. If we go back 20 years, speaking of that, if you remember the original U.S., maybe Canada, but commercials for the original N64 Super Smash Brothers, the one that goes, something's gone terribly wrong in the happy-go-lucky world of Nintendo. That also used the Turtles Happy Together in that one as well. I don't know if the folks who were putting together the trailer knew that. Maybe someone pointed it out to them. Hey, this song is, that makes it work a little bit better, maybe, Holding Out for a Hero, I have a bit of a history with that. I used to play that to fill time on PIRN back in the day. So
really?
I guess I'm vindicated there. As far as using popular music in the actual movie, well, you got Psyduck. I can only think of Weird Al's I Want a New Duck. His parody of Huey Lewis in the News. That might have been an interesting choice there. But we'll see, with the sequel, if Warner Brothers and their associated record labels are more involved on those, we might get something a little bit closer to the first couple movies and some of the stuff there. And it'll be interesting to see. I have some, depending on where they go with this, because, people are talking now that Detective Pikachu's been at least somewhat successful. We won't know the full story for a few more weeks once more following weeks of box office come in. But, we kind of got to think, is there going to be a Pokemon cinematic universe at some point? And
Who would have thought
I
that we'd
suppose if
ever
you're
be
looking at
asking
side
that question?
games, may- but maybe we see something like if you're going to do side games, something based on either Snap or Mystery Dungeon would seem like a possible choice there.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
specific characters, some of the other human characters from the video games. I'm not sure,
Pokemon
but
Troze, the
we'll have to
movie.
see where all this leads. But I did want to point out, like I said, that little thing about the music there. Like I said, especially knowing the pedigree with someone who had worked on Guardians of the Galaxy. Part of me does kind of want an alternate version of this where there are more. I don't think we'll see a Troze movie or Pokemon Shuffle the movie, but maybe a documentary on Pokemon Go would be interesting. But that would be
Oh,
those things around and put those out there. But okay, well, I think that's going to about do it for that part of our discussion. Let's go ahead. I'm going to talk about what's coming up here and what's been on recently. Some of you may remember that last weekend. Well, it was early this week. It was meant to be last weekend for Mother's Day because it's partially how that video ends. I did another Why It Works video on Flying Without Wings from the second movie. I guess I can stop the recordings here so we don't keep making stuff there. I got about hour 13 minutes on there, so we had a lot to cover with this one. I think that was definitely worth saying. But anyway, I talked about that one and how I think the problem, well, mechanically the problem, and I think the reason people have sort of that doesn't work with this movie is twofold. One is I think that they were going for a parent-child relationship, which if they had a female singer for that one, no disrespect to Westlife, very accomplished. Because I think they were going for the Ash Delia reunion at the end of that movie. And then what was the other one? Oh, the other thing is that, of course, it says Flying Without Wings, and yet the main characters of that movie all have wings. So that was, but if you look at it from a different way, I just kind of wanted to point that out. If you haven't taken a look at that, that's the latest in our series of Why It Works. Let me know how those are going. I got this idea a ways back, and I wanted to do more of these short little interstitial things to drive folks towards our discussions who might be intimidated by seeing an hour-long plus discussion on Pokemon music. That's a bit much for me. That was kind of the idea behind those. Let's see. And then coming up, let's see. In a couple of weeks, we have Midwest Regionals here in Madison, so I'll be going to that. I'll be doing some sort of stream afterwards talking about my time there. And then next month is also North American Internationals in Columbus, and eventually some other stuff will be coming up here. And I figure I might as well give you a chance. What were your thoughts on the Why It Works series while we're live here? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I liked it. I thought you had some good observations about like the themes of the movie that are represented in the song. The mother-son one is one I wouldn't jump to naturally because my first thought is Pokemon and Pokemon trainers. But like there are a lot of ways to tie it into the relationships in that movie. And I thought it was like some really interesting little nuggets of thought.
Yeah, and actually, going back, like I said, the second movie is still my favorite. I've obviously, in preparation for that, I had to watch a lot of it, and although there were parts of Detective Pikachu that did move me to tears a little bit, seeing the Rhyme City for the first time on the screen, and the world there was a little bit of a tearjerker. I'm not going to lie there. There's a few other things. Going through 2000, I think that I really want this 3D remake of Mewtwo Strikes Back to do really well, so that they decide to go ahead and do it again for 2000. It's actually probably a much more ambitious movie to do a 3D recreation of, just because of all the flying Pokemon and all that stuff and the camera angles and whatnot.
And water and like there's a lot going on in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, some elements of that movie were already CG, but you get the idea there.
Yeah.
So will be interesting to see. I'm hopeful that we'll get something a little bit, as much as I like having the Fathom event stuff for this, I'm hoping the Mewtwo Strikes Back gets something a little bit bigger than that, just because of sort of the stuff there. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff we could have brought in here that we just didn't have really time for, but thank you for everyone there. I'm trying to think if there's anything else going on you should know about, but I think that more or less covers it. So thank you very much. We're going to stop the broadcast and I'll talk to Ann for a little bit. All right, folks. Thanks.
Bye.